over the next 3 lessons, we are going to be working on circles. And in particular, over the first 2 lessons, you're going to be completing an activity or an experiment at home that will lead us to a really interesting and a really important fact that is linked to circles. Now, before we get started on the activity or the experiment, I'd like you to sketch a circle in your book or on a piece of paper, because there are 2 important parts of the circle that we need to label and you need to be comfortable with before we can make a start on this activity. Now, there are 2 things that we're going to label on this circle, and the first one is the circumference, which is the perimeter of a circle. So basically, this line that I've drawn here, this circle that I've drawn, the line around the outside is called the circumference. And the second thing that we're going to label is something that's called the diameter. And the diameter is a straight line that runs from one side of the circle to the other, but it has to go through the very centre, which we call the centre point. Now, on my circle here, and actually a lot of the time throughout this lesson, you're not going to have the centre point. So it's really important that we're as accurate as possible to get the line that goes through the centre. Now, the best way that I've found to do that is to label any point on the perimeter or the circumference of the circle. And from this point, there is always going to be a point on the opposite side that runs through the centre point. And that's going to be the longest line from that point to the other side of the circle. So what I'm going to do is get a ruler and put 0 next to the point that I've already drawn. And what I'm going to do is look at the other side, and I'm going to move my ruler about a little bit. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here, until I get to the point where I get the longest line. So if I move this point around, this point here, if I join these up, that's the furthest line or the longest line I could have drawn. So that's as accurate as I could have been, and I believe that that line goes through the center point there. Okay, so what you need to do is draw the longest line from one point to the opposite side of the circle, and this is called my diameter. Now, is these 2 things, or these 2 parts of a circle, that we are going to use in today's lesson and tomorrow's as well for our little experiment. Okay, now I've put this onto Google Classroom, but you're going to need quite a few things for this activity. First of all, you're going to need a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, which hopefully you would have had anyway. You're going to need a ruler to be able to do what I just did with this circle here to find the diameter. You're also going to need either a piece of string or a measuring tape to be able to measure the outside of the circle. You're going to need to print off or copy into your books the table that I've put onto Google Classroom, which looks like this. And finally, you're going to need 8, if you can find them, circular objects from around your house. So I've had a little look around my house, and I've found a glue stick, which is a circular item, or it has a circular base. I've found some sellotape, which I could use. I found my Welsh mug, which I'm going to use in a moment. I've got some Pringles, my favourite prawn cocktail, which has a circular base. What else have I got? You could get some kitchen roll or loo roll paper, or the base, which is a circular base. I found a celebrations box, and I've also found a cactus, which is in a plant pot that has a circular base. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a circular pot. So those are just some examples. Obviously you don't need to find those exact items in your house, but they do need to have, they either need to be a circle or have a circular base. Now I'm going to use my Welsh mug as an example for what you need to do for each of your 8 circles or items. So the first thing I'm going to do is write the name of my circular item on this left hand column here. So I'm going to write Welsh mug. Now if you want to use my Welsh mug as an example for you to get started, that is absolutely fine. And in today's lesson we're only going to concentrate on these 2 columns, the circumference measurement and the diameter measurement. We're not going to worry about these 4, that they will come into play in tomorrow's lesson or your next lesson. So I need to measure my circumference and my diameter of my Welsh mug. So I think the best way to do this will be to get your piece of paper, put your circular item onto the piece of paper and draw around it as best as you can. And there we have it. I'm going to write, or just label, that this is the mug. Okay, now first of all let's measure the circumference. You've got 2 options here, and you might need a bit of help to do this with someone from home. You can either put your string onto this line and measure around the circle like that. Okay, now when you get to the end you need to pinch the point of the string where you stopped and then measure it using a ruler. Okay, so measure that distance, straight line using a ruler. I think a better way of doing the circumference is to wrap the string around your items. So if I wrap this around here, this should be a little bit easier for me to do on my own. I'm going to pinch the string where they meet, and then I'm going to measure this distance. Okay. Now, I don't have any help at home, so this is going to be a little bit tricky, but if I get my ruler, and hopefully you can see here that when I lay it out straight, my measurement is 25.8 centimeters. So my measurement that I'm going to put in my table for my circumference of the mug is 25.8 centimeters. And now we need to measure the diameter. Now I showed you how to do this earlier. I'm going to put a point on one side of the circle. Now I'm going to measure that line, and it is 8 centimeters exactly. 8 centimeters exactly. So in my table, my diameter for the mug is 8 centimeters exactly. So I found my 2 measurements. For my mug, the circumference was 25.8 and the diameter was 8 centimeters exactly. So that's the Welsh mug done. And what you need to do is find 7 more items, circular items, and measure the circumference and diameter for each one. And once you've done that, that will be the end of this first lesson on circles. As I said, we'll use these 4 columns in your next lesson, in your second lesson in this little topic. So make sure once you've finished with this table today, and after you've uploaded a photo onto Google Classroom, you keep this safe so that you can come back to it in your next maths lesson. Now what I've uploaded onto Google Classroom is also a piece of paper that has lots of circles already drawn onto it. So if you're struggling to find 8 items around your house which are circles, you might want to print that out and use those instead. Okay, that's it for today's lesson. Remember to upload a photo onto Google Classroom, and good luck with finding 8 items and measuring the circumference and diameter.